While it may seem that the Genesis 1 through 11 account is a matter of chronology, it doesn't take very much exploration to realize that the first two chapters present two different versions of the creation of the universe. So what we have to think about as we look at this whole section is, what kind of literary structure does it present, and how does that help us understand what the narrator is trying to convey? If, for example, we look at the first four stories, the first four chapters of Genesis, we will find a structure that is really quite telling. The first chapter deals with the intentions of God, what God was all about. Who is God? It answers that question. Whereas the second chapter really answers the question, who are we? Who are our people? And notice that these two chapters both tell us about what God's plan is. But when we get into chapter 3, we see how mankind violates the creation, violates this understanding of who God is, denies the sovereignty of God by wishing to be in charge. And the fourth chapter shows how man violates what God intended for humans. So that chapters 3 and 4 give the negative side. They talk about the intentions of humanity rather than the intentions of God. Genesis 1 is very well structured as well. And you'll notice that on the first day there is the creation of light, but that creation involves separation. There's a distinction between the light and the darkness. Now, the question comes up, how in the world do you have light before there's a day? Well, let's keep looking at the situation and maybe we'll get an answer. On the second day, there is the creation of the sky, separating the water above from the water below. I know this may not make a whole lot of sense in the modern world, but if you see things from the perspective that we've outlined about a three-tiered universe, the water above is held in place by like a Tupperware bowl turned upside down. It's called the firmament in the King James translation. That firmament keeps the water above from falling down on your little head. Then on the third day, there's the separation of the land from the seas. So there's the creation of the dry ground as well as the creation of vegetation. Notice that these 3 days are all stationary. They're static. They don't move around. Let's see how they set the stage for the next 3 days. You'll notice on day 4 we have the creation of the lights in the sky, and there's a reference to the greater light and the lesser light. Obviously the sun and the moon. The Hebrew words weren't used because the Hebrew word for sun, Shemesh, was also the name of a Canaanite god. So the narrator avoided that word. But the separation is to separate the days from the night. Notice how this fits into how it mirrors day 1, where there's a separation of light and darkness. So in day 4 we see the items in the sky which move around. From their perspective, the moon and the sun and the stars all moved. The elements from the first 3 days form the backdrop, the foundation for the elements of the next 3 days. So, on day 5, the elements, the items which swim in the sea and the creatures which fly in the sky are created. That echoes the creation of day 2, in which the sky and the sea were created. We had to have those stationary elements created before it made any sense to create the items that would live in those elements. This is a very orderly structure, not simply a random, chaotic creation. Continuing the theme, on the sixth day, there's the creation of all the animals and of mankind to live on the dry land. And just as vegetation was created in day 3, now plants for food are created because now there are animals to eat the food. So the structure here is meant to imply that the God who was known by the Jews was a God who was orderly, not chaotic. He planned things. He structured things. His creation was done by design. It was not accidental. While chapter 1 takes a cosmic view, looking at the universe almost from above, chapter 2 takes a much more human, earthy view. And in fact, chapter 2 is very concerned with human relationships. As you read through the narrative, you find that the man is made from dirt, from the earth. He has a relationship to the earth. The human also has a relationship to the divine because the divine breath, the Spirit of God is breathed into him. He relates to the animals. He's given the responsibility of naming them and so be in control over them. And then finally, of course, male and female are related to one another. So this chapter deals with how humans are created and what relationships they have. As you recall, chapter 2 deals with God's intentions. But look what happens when human intentions come into play. The relationship that humans have with the earth is disrupted because now humans have to work hard. They earn their bread by the sweat of their brow. Relations with the divine are disrupted. The humans hide from God. They don't want to be found. They don't want to speak to him, and he has to inquire, how did this come about? There's a symbolic disruption of the relationship with the animals, as the snake is condemned and told that he will be an enemy to humans. And of course, there's a disruption between male and female, as the female is told that now, unlike God's plan, she will be mastered by the husband. So this chapter shows us the opposite direction, the disruption, the breaking of creation that happens because of the actions of humans.